We talk about the beer that you love to be drinking. So many topics to choose from, we're sure to keep you thinking.
I'm Megan Penmann. I worked for Other Half for 2 to 3 years as a creative director, design director, and I produced probably around 500 labels, beer labels during that time. So I am well-versed in the beer world.
I'm Sarah Hedlund. I am the creative director and artist for Toppling, Goliath Brewing in Decorah, Iowa. I've been here for 4 years. I do not have a running count of how many labels I've done, but I would be interested to know that number at this point. I did some freelance for a few other breweries before this, and just looking forward to chatting with everybody.
Yeah. Ryan Adams, I'm from Portland, Maine. Muralist, sign painter, designer, just drawing on things mostly. I currently do the labels for Short Throw Brewing.
I'm Dean McKeever, also known as Keever. And I'm a freelance artist. I work here from my home studio in Western Massachusetts. And I work for a lot of breweries, most notably Treehouse Brewing and Vitamin C Brewing here in Massachusetts.
Catboy is my Instagram handle that I kept as my Instagram handle for too long, and now that's my artist name. I'm actually the director of production and I brew most of the wort at the Vale. That's my day job. And then kind of as a side gig, I just started drawing more as I continued working here and got some cool freelance gigs with Monkish and Other Half. And I do Vale labels here and there. And then I just recently, through Sam Richardson, he hit me up to do the Green City labels. I think he asked for 5 originally, and I think we ended up doing 7. And then I also kind of did the campaign behind the branding, kind of evolved into that for the Green City this year.
Green City is why we're all here. So this is my Green City glass from last year.
Nice.
So how did you get into working in the beer industry, and what would you recommend for somebody who's trying to break into it?
Yeah. So I entered Surly Brewing in Minneapolis. I don't know if you guys know about them. They do barrel-aged stout every year called Darkness, and every year they hire a new artist to do the label and the commemorative poster for it, and it's always just like super heavy, like metal, goth, Halloween-y art, which is like my super jam, super Halloween nerd. So I kept throwing my name in the hat for that, like year after year after year, and like not getting it and just being like, gonna keep trying. Never did get it, but one year I entered and they were actually getting distribution into Iowa, and they were looking to hire 3 artists from Iowa to work together on a poster to kind of celebrate their new distribution. And so I got hired to do that with Surly, and that was my first kind of step into craft beer. And then I started doing all of the packaging design for a brewery in Whitewater, Wisconsin called Second Salem, which again was my jam because everything was like witches and vampires and werewolves. And I was like cloud 9, and did that freelance for about 1.5 years. And then just saw a job posting for Toppling Goliath. Full disclosure, I had no idea who we were. Like, I liked craft beer, but I'm not one of these, like, I know everything about every brewery because there's like 8,000 of them. It's impossible now to know everything. So I mentioned it to my brother-in-law, and he like freaked out, and he was like, you have to get this job because I need to get this beer from you for free once you get the job. And I was like, okay. Like, I applied and got the job, and I've been there ever since. So it was kind of just a series of small little gigs that led to this path. But working for a brewery was like on my dream list of jobs when I graduated from art school many moons ago, right? It's just something that sounded really cool. And then something that I would suggest to people, this is what I say to anybody who's doing art, I think probably any creative field, is just make it. Like, don't wait for the job, just make it. Like, and then you can send it to that person and say like, hey, I made this thing. And they might be like, I don't care, I don't know who you are, and never respond to you. But every once in a while, somebody will be like, that's super cool, who are you? Let's work together. So, I was doing like fake out packaging design before I ever got a job doing actual beer packaging design. And same goes for anything. Like I used to just make posters for bands and then just email them, and some of them bought them and then used them, and it was super cool. But I think if you sit around waiting for those opportunities to make that art, it's really hard. So I always just say, make it and see what happens.
Cool. Justin, how about you? How did you get into it?
I got into it. I've always kind of just drawn on the margins of my notebooks, in school and stuff. And then honestly, being really creative at the Vale and making new beers every week and having encouragement from my boss, Matt, to just keep creating. Like I started drawing. I used to draw on my phone at work because we'd work for like 14 hours. So I'd sit there and draw on my phone when I was CIPing a tank or something. And I ended up doing some maps for our festival. So like Sarah said, I think if you can get in and like just do something small, and if somebody gives you a little break, like keep working that angle and keep making art, and people respond, it's always surprising and cool. And you can make exactly what you like to make and people will, respond.
Cool. Ryan, how about you? How did you get started? Were you making art before and then you kind of fell into beer cans, or?
Yeah. So my my art background is pretty unconventional. I was a graffiti writer for like years. So that's kind of where I started kind of putting things together and putting stuff out there. One of my best friends from childhood owns Novare Race up here, which is a massive beer bar, and they have an outdoor deck. And he was like, hey man, you can just go nuts, paint this if you want. So I kind of like started in one area. The spray paint kind of continued around the whole spot. And just from being there and having my work up out there, I met the owners of Good Fire Brewing. And I ended up doing some signage for them, some hand lettered signage, and then also a mural on the side of their building. And their in-house designer was like, hey, can we use a piece of your mural to do a can? And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And when it came out, I was like, oh, I kind of dig that. So kind of through other connections in the beer world, linked up with Short Throw Brewing, and have been working for them since. But yeah, it all kind of came from just painting and putting it out there. So if I were to give any advice, that's the thing to do, is just stay working and put it out to the world. So
cool. Dean, how about you?
I just knew that I wanted to break into the beer industry, and I tried this really great new beer from around here, which I had never heard of, which was from a brewery called Treehouse. I thought the beer was amazing, and that the label, it got the job done, but it definitely deserved a better label treatment. So I sort of beefed up my online portfolio of my, a new body of work, and then just kept basically emailing them until someone got back to me. And they responded saying that they didn't need beer labels, but their merchandise was kind of stale. So they bought three designs for me that I submitted to them, one of which they ended up in a pinch using as one of their curiosity labels, which is their sort of experimental rotating series. And each label is like one and done. Each beer too, it's like I said, it's experimental. So it once it's gone, it's gone. So there's definitely like a cult following there. And they used one of my designs, and the rest is history. So it got a really good response from their fans and from the people that work there. They liked the new direction of the art, and we just kept rolling along with that. And it sort of has just snowballed into, been with them, over 5 years now. I've been with Vitamin C over 5 years. Worked with at least a dozen different breweries all over the world. So as far as advice we're getting, into this, all you guys have said pretty much what I was going to say. Most importantly, just keep grinding, keep creating. Definitely have your best work and most recent work online to share with people that you meet in the industry. Always have business cards on you, and it's a no until you ask. If you assume, oh, this brewery doesn't need labels, they already have them, or whatever, it's then it's a no. But if you walk up and give them your business card and shoot them an email like I did, like all you guys did, I'm sure, that's, you can break into it. So that's what I would recommend. Just beef up your work online, have your best stuff online, and present the kind of work that you want to continue doing. So if you're into black and white work, have your best black and white work online and shop that around to breweries, and that's the type of work you will hopefully end up getting.
Cool. Awesome. That's great. Loved hearing everyone's story and how they got into it.
Yeah, totally.
So this next one, since we're all in our own home spaces, or maybe your workspace, I want you to describe your workspace. Is it small? Is it big? Is it in your house? Do you have a separate studio? Do you like it loud with music, quiet? Do you have papers everywhere? Like, what is your workspace look like, and what would your ideal workspace be if that's not what your actual workspace is? So I'll start with Ryan.
So my workspace is in my house, in my basement. I actually share studio space with my wife, who's also an artist. And we have two sides to the space down there. We have kind of our side with the desks and everything's clean and sort of well lit. And then there's the other side that's just raw, holds all the paint, and where I paint signs and do stuff where I can get messy. It is kind of a mess at most points. We have two little ones, so like cleaning up the studio usually happens like once a month, and we're always kind of like trading off and going down there, so it's usually pretty nuts, but it's kind of organized chaos. I know where everything is, even if it's in a pile in a corner. But ideally I would like for it to be a little more clean and maybe sunny, but I also do like the fact that it's kind of in a cave because I'm not distracted by much. I think that's kind of the most accurate depiction of my workspace.
Cool. Justin, how about you?
I have an office at my house that I should draw in, but I almost never do. It's got, the cat stuff in there, cat litter, and some of my records and stuff like that. But it's set up to be a good workspace, but I'm almost always just out in the dining room, or something like that on my iPad. So,
how many cats do you have?
Just one. Cliche.
It would have been awesome if you were like, I have 10 cats.
Yeah, it's a long story. But.
Sarah, how about you? What's your workspace like?
Well, this is my workspace right now. I've been working from home since I think March 17th. So I used to have an office at the brewery. I have given it away to others so that they can have fewer people in different spaces of the building. So currently this is it. So this is my studio, which means a lot of things. So I'm a big sewer. So like one whole section is just like fabric and costumes from years of obsessive Halloween costume making. And then, paintings from high school through college, 30 some years of artwork just piled everywhere. Art books everywhere. I try to keep it pretty organized. I'm a big proponent of, if you can at least control that, it helps not overwhelm you when everything else gets kind of sideways. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but 2020 has been a little bit of a beast. So I've been kind of obsessively like cleaning things because it gives me a sense of control. Because whatever, you got to do what you got to do to make it through it. But yeah, I mean, it's a small space, but it's nice, and I feel very happy and appreciative that I have a job where I am able to stay at home and be safe, and I'm working for a company that's allowing me to do that, because I know there are so many people right now who do not have that privilege. So I've been enjoying it, except for my neighbor's tiny dog Bubbles that barks all day. So there's been a few moments where I've been like at the window, like Bubbles, like screaming at the dog. But besides that, it's good. It's a good space. And I am a huge podcast nerd, so I like obsessively listen to like My Favorite Murder on podcasts on Spotify like all day long, and Science of Happiness and Criminal and whatever. So I try to remind myself that music exists, because I do love music, but I will just sit there and binge podcasts for 8 hours like every day.
And then Dean, are you in your workspace right now, I assume? It looks like
Yes, yeah, this is a spare bedroom in my house that has been my studio for almost like 3 or 4 years now. But I bounced all over the house. I had like a corner of the dining room at one point. I had, in my bedroom at one point. So this is a spare bedroom. I did have a satellite studio for larger projects for a year or two, but I transitioned out of there and just moved everything here. And I'm in the process of fixing up my basement to allow for larger and messier projects. But upstairs where I'm at right now is more of my like home base. It's definitely my happy place, and it's my ideal studio situation because it's right above where I sleep, and I don't really have to go very far, and it has all my supplies. I got tons of built-in storage. I got my flat file back there, so yeah, it's definitely my ideal situation.
Yeah, is anyone else jealous of the flat file?
Yes, I was just going to say that. I need one, and I
know. Immediately I was like, look at that flat file.
I know.
Yeah, well, the good stuff is in there. It's like barely, the top drawer is my work, and then the rest of them are just filled with my ephemera collection of old movie posters and just photography and just crazy stuff. And I also share this space. Right next to me is my wife's desk. She's a really great watercolor artist. So we work next to each other, and drawer number 4, my flat file right there is all of her paintings. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. I love seeing in everyone's space. Like that's been my favorite thing about Zooms is like peeping into people's houses.
Yeah,
like,
totally. Yeah, cool.
voyeur about that stuff. So let's try to do this one quickly because I think there's more fun questions. But I think people will want to know what's the process. And I know that each brewery kind of has a different process for creating a new label. So just tell me about like, would the brewery give you the name of the beer and that's it? Or would you come up with the concept and present artwork? Or is it different every time? Or just kind of, you want to quickly describe your experience with that? So I'll start with Dean.
Cool. Yeah, it definitely varies brewery to brewery for me personally, since I work with so many at once. Just to give you an example, Treehouse, they're very specific on what they're looking for, but they leave it up to me stylistically. We work hard to figure out what we want the next 6 or so labels to look like stylistically, and then they're pretty they definitely direct me in what they want the image to be of. Whereas Vitamin C, Dino and I, the owner, we have really built a close bond as far as how we want the labels to look, and he will send me like a screenshot of something from Google and then just lets me run with it, and we're usually good to go. Whereas I've been doing a lot of labels for Battery Steel now lately, and they're a lot more open. They'll just say bright and bold and colorful and just go for it. So I used to only work traditionally and then scan that in, but now I've been working kind of both traditionally and digitally with my iPad, leaning on programs like Procreate and relying heavily on Illustrator to finish it off as far as the label treatment for the boring stuff on the edge, the barcode, the warnings, all that good stuff. I deal with all that as well. But Photoshop is really great too, as I'm sure you all know, to move a few things around, brighten a few things up. But I'd say the bulk of my work does begin on either the iPad or traditionally just as a watercolor on my desk.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sarah, how about you? What's your process like?
It depends. Every once in a while, when I first started, it was a little bit more likely that they would come in with a name. So I started 4 years ago. I rebranded the whole company at that point and then went through and redid every single label that we had like already established. So that was a lion's share of my first year. But then like one of the first brands that we built when I was there was Fire Skulls and Money. And so the owner came in and he's like, we want to make this beer and it's going to call Fire Skulls and $signs is what they wanted. I was like, that was the dumbest name I have ever heard in my life. And they were like, we want it to look like this. And they had like a napkin they had drawn on at a bar. And I was like, I hate all of you. I hate this name. Like, I was like, this is the worst. And it ended up great. And, you know, we had fun with it. There was 3 of them that came up with it. So I illustrated with like 3 skulls to you know, signify the 3, you know, numbskulls, as we always joke, that came up with this idea that I thought was like such a silly name. And I talked them into the word money instead of dollar signs, because that was, you know, just people have a hard enough time reading without using icons instead of words. But that was kind of one of the only ones that we've had where they've come to me with a name. Usually the brewer will come in and will say, hey, we're doing a collab with Melvin. It's an IPA. And then he leaves the room. And then that's it. That's all I get. So I name most of our collabs. I've named some of our other larger beers that have gone into full distribution also. Naming is not my favorite because it is super hard now. There's so many breweries and we have big enough distribution that we really have to be careful. We can't just be like, oh, well, this guy hasn't made this for 2 years. Let's just use the name anyways, right? So we put a lot of work into making sure we're not using someone else's name and then sending it to a lawyer and making sure it gets trademarked. And then from there, I will kind of base the artwork off the name, right? Because like I can draw a picture of anything, but there's only so many names I can use. So that's kind of the direction that we go in. And then I usually do a sketch just for myself. And I just go for it. I just illustrate it and then I send it to the brewmaster and the owner and a few of the salespeople, and we just go from there. So I used to do like send a sketch, ask for advice. But the way that we kind of look at it is like, I don't know, like if that's your jam and you know what you're doing, everybody just kind of gets out of your way at our brewery. That's kind of like, I don't tell the brewer how to make beer. He doesn't tell me how to make a label. We all just kind of like appreciate each other's strong suits and kind of get out of each other's way as much as possible, which is really nice in a creative front. I have a ton of creative freedom working for the company for sure. And then the collabs are interesting because then you're working with a whole other brewery, right? And sending them ideas and kind of doing back and forth. So I really enjoy the collabs because those tend to be the wackier labels that we do because we still do them in bombers. So I can use like hundreds of colors if I want to, whereas direct print cans are like a little bit of a bummer for an artist because like you have such a limit of colors and details. You can only get so small before the plates start breaking off little pieces. So I really get excited when I get to do a bottle label again. And then I do all of my work in Illustrator 100%. But it is funny, my coworkers will like see sketches and they're like, you drew that? And I'm like, where do you think this is coming from? And they're like, well, it's on a computer. I'm like, it's not a button that you hit and the computer just draws the picture. So that's always funny to me that people, I think there's that disconnect. They don't think that like if you're making digital art that you can draw, you know? But for the kind of work that we do, you know, yeah, I've never done like just hand-drawn artwork for a label. So kudos to anybody that does that. Because it's a lot of work to then translate that into the right file formats for printing. So I deal with all that too. So I do all the TTB submittals and I work with all the printers and do all the pre-press stuff. So beginning to end, the whole process.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get the people saying to you, oh, you drew that? Like I've had that a couple of times. Like, yeah, this is not MS clip art. This is not.
Yeah. I didn't Google beer label and then plop it on there.
No.
That's not what you do. That's what I do.
Shoot, I could have just been doing that the whole time.
Yeah, it's Microsoft Word clip art, like
Yeah.
Windows 98. That's the hotness. That's where it's all at, man.
MS Paint.
Yep.
Justin, what do you guys do at the Veil? What's your sort of process for doing a label?
So Tim is our creative director. He does most of our label artwork. But I'm involved in, getting the information to him, and then usually, if you haven't seen some of our beer labels, most of them that's Tim's artwork. They're awesome, and usually we just give him full reign. We're like, this is the beer name, or there's 3 new double IPAs coming out next month, and then Matt, our head brewer, he might have like 2 points of reference. Like he wants it to be matte black with a silver highlight or something like that, and I'll just put that on a little like Google sheet for Tim, who's mostly remote, and then he'll come back with something that's usually pretty awesome. Myself, I draw on Procreate if I ever get a label or any other commission, something to draw. And that's just been an awesome tool for me. Tim taught me how to use, I'm always texting him about tips on Procreate and stuff. Just recently learned how to draw in CMYK instead of RGB and having to transfer it over, and then I don't have the neon colors that I wanted in my drawing. So learning things like that, because I didn't go to art school, learning things like that the hard way, Also, it's fun when there's like a really challenging label, like some of these other half labels were crazy, like Sam's ideas for those, I know. He wanted 7 labels, and I was like, I have, how the hell am I going to do this? And, I'd come home from work every day and just spend hours drawing there, and then like making sure I had to make all of those characters into vectors later. So I had a little bit of experience with that, but I learned Illustrator a lot more, and I learned how to gotten a little bit better at preparing to make things into vectors later. So, you know what I mean? With my style of art. So, yeah.
Cool. Ryan, how about you? What usually happens when you do a label?
Yeah, so I feel pretty fortunate because it's just myself and Brandon, the owner, that communicate about the labels. So he'll just say, hey, I got this name and this is the style of beer it is. And so he kind of found me through my like geometric style of work, which I'm most, I guess, known for with like murals and fine art and things like that. So when I came on, he was kind of like, do you want to use this style for the cans? So it's kind of within a similar lane most of the time. But yeah, we're both like hip hop rap nerds, and most of the names have something to do with like some lyric from the 90s or something. So he'll come to me with an idea, and if I don't know it, we'll kind of talk about that and figure out kind of where his mind's at, if there's any inside jokes he's trying to put in there. And then, yeah, so I do most of my work with Procreate as well, and then kind of finish it off in Photoshop. But yeah, it's really straightforward. I send him a couple copies and we just talk about kind of what to refine and what works, what doesn't. And then usually it's like one round of revisions, and then we send it off to be printed. So like I said, I feel really fortunate. It's very like direct and easy.
Yeah. And I guess my next question was sort of off of that, like, those of you who already have like an art practice, how much is your side art practice or your primary art practice come into the label designs, like, and where do those things overlap, or do they at all? So, Dean, how about you? Like, cause you paint and stuff, right? Or
yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, obviously the beer label thing is a big part of my, I guess, my career. But I do a lot of murals also. I also, work in other industries, like, I've done skateboards and, LP art, that sort of thing. But I also do a lot of stuff in my online shop. So I have, always like prints and of my work available. And just trying to, it's tough. I'm sure all you guys know, it's like tough to have your main income, your main art grind. And it's kind of like sometimes I get bummed out thinking like, sometimes I just want to do stuff for myself, It's like, I like kind of miss the early days where it's like it was like 80-20, like 80% my own stuff, 20%, a gig or two on the side. And now it's like 80% like, work stuff. And then maybe here and there I'll, have a sketch going on my iPad that I've been, pecking at for a few weeks that has nothing to do with any like job stuff, So that's why I try to take those, few minutes here and there and focus on my, side grind alongside with, the full-time thing with my breweries and stuff. I think that's really important too, because I schedule out each week, and if I have a free day, I'll just like write my own name on that day, like just write Dean in all caps. And it's like, so when I get up in the morning, I know, oh shit, like, that's my day. I'm going to focus on my stuff, whether it's, even not even drawing. Sometimes I'll just spend a day like working on my finances or working on research, or go to a library that's doing a book sale and find some cool old reference imagery. Really anything that usually you don't have time for or might get lost when focusing on client work. So I think that's really important to focus on yourself sometimes too.
Yeah. And Ryan, so are you painting in your basement space? Are you still doing that sort of walls and street art stuff too at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I co-own a sign painting and mural company up here in Portland called Better Letter, hand painted signs. And like, that is kind of my bread and butter there, is that I'm usually on site, lettering somewhere or painting a commissioned mural from a business. So that's kind of like the bulk of my weeks. And yeah, and also I do fine art as well. So I work on paintings when I'm not on site, and all of it kind of feeds each other. I think kind of the exploration in the studio helps with ideas to go larger, and also kind of gets your brain thinking about different ways to work on design. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I think I too miss those early days sometimes, or it was just like, oh, I'm just gonna go outside and spray paint all week like that. It's now all kind of for jobs, but taking that time to really kind of sit, do things for yourself, and explore your own work is only going to help kind of what you can do for your jobs. So yeah, that's basically it.
Cool. And Sarah, how do you integrate your art practice into what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm full-time at TG, so that makes it different too, right? So it's 40 hours a week, sitting in this chair, staring at the screen. So I especially, I feel like since COVID started, like I haven't wanted to do any digital work after work, because I'm like, dude, I have sat in that chair for 40 hours. I don't want to do it anymore. Like, I want to get out of this tiny blue room and like be anywhere else. So I've definitely done a lot more sketching, like that, like hand drawing in other areas of my house than digital. But I do have, side projects. I've got a children's book that I've been working on for like a year, right? And I just do spreads like as I'm like in the right space, and I'm just like, someday this will be done, and maybe someday someone will publish it. Who knows? Like, I'm just working on it. But I think it's true. I think it's important to have that side work, because I think it helps keep you excited about what you're doing and brings in the new inspiration. The one thing that I do consistently is I do the 31 days of Halloween every year. So I like obsessively draw horror stuff for 31 days. And that's my jam.
Inktober?
What?
Inktober? Do you do Inktober?
Yeah, so I do like Inktober, but I pick my own category every year.
Cool.
And make my own, like, like last year I did horror movies. One year I did all witches. One year was like urban legends. And I just like do all these illustrations. And those are super fun for me to do. And some of those some of my freelance work has also inspired like some stuff that we've done. Like I've had coworkers be like, dude, that thing you did, that was cool. We should make a label that is kind of like that, So there's been a few times that some of my side work has kind of influenced things I've done at the brewery. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a weird place to be in your career, right? Though, like where you go from that, like either not having a creative job or having a creative job, but you're a production artist, right? Like you're like, I'm laying out UPCs on 48 hang tags a day for this company. Like it's graphic design, but it's not really like super creative, to the point where you get to be creative, but then you start feeling bummed out that you're like being creative for somebody else. So I think, again, it's that balancing that gratitude, right, of the privilege of being paid to make art, but then balance that out with like your own personal needs as an artist, so that you don't get too burnt out in one direction or the other. So.
Mm-hmm.
And Justin, do you have anything to note on that?
I think, yeah, I mean, most of my labels, if I do labels or any like drawing commissions, I like to make sure that they know that I'm gonna draw in my style, pretty much. They have to accept my style in order to kind of want my artwork. And the closer I can get to my style, or like that idea I had in the back of my head last week of, you know, whatever it is, if I can implement that into the commission or like make it cool in my way, then I think that ends up making the art better, you know, overall. So
cool. So we don't have a ton of time left, so I'm gonna kind of skip around. So aside from free beer or your relatives getting free beer, what is the best part about designing for beer? Dean, what do you think for you?
Yeah, nothing, just the free beer. No. Definitely, like I've met some of my like current like best friends through the job that I have. Not only brewers, but just people you bump into at the brewery or breweries. And I mean, I think this is like one of the best industries to work in. Just super, like fans of beer are just also, I found, I mean, I don't know if this is true for all breweries, but fans of beer are not only fans of beer, but like super stoked on artwork and music and supporting not only the brewery, but supporting small artists and other small businesses. And that's what I like about it too, is it's like, you know, even now with COVID, you know, you go to a brewery, there's a couple food trucks there, local food trucks, and maybe an artist has popped up, and it's just like a cool like community thing. So yeah, I would definitely say like the networking I've made, you know, which has helped me get other jobs and meet new people and go to different places. And you know, I like a brewery I do work for, Tioga Sequoia Brewing in Fresno, California. You know, they found my work through the grapevine, you know, seeing my stuff I do for Treehouse and Vitamin C. And, you know, I've been with them almost 5 years, and, you know, they've flown me out there to paint murals and do pop-ups. And I've just, you know, before working for them, I went to California once when I was like 12. And now you know, some of my best friends live out there, and I can like navigate around Fresno, like, you know, almost like I live there. And I wouldn't have any of those opportunities if it weren't for the craft beer community and doing labels. So
cool.
Yeah.
And Sarah, for you, other than your family, your brother, was it your brother who wanted free beer?
It was my brother-in-law who wanted the free beer. It's funny how quickly people get picky though, right? They're like, oh, I don't want, I had some of that last time. Can you give me some of this? Like, yeah, I mean, I think anybody who likes to make art can fully appreciate getting paid to make art, right? Like I try to be very humble about that and remember that I could be living a very different life, right? Where I don't get to do this. I've also got to travel a lot, you know, when we've got distribution in new areas, I've got to go on a lot of those trips, which I'm always geeked out about. I like to find art museums in any place that I travel. So like super nerd, I'm like, I got to go to all these art museums I never would have probably gone to otherwise. And some of them are surprising, like Indianapolis. Their art museum's like legit. Check it out if you're ever there. Like weird, didn't expect it. And you know, I think it's just, it's fun to see your art out in the wild, you know, like it's not isolated to Instagram. It's not just like sitting a folder in my office somewhere. Like it is cool to be out in the store and just glance over and see your stuff. Although I think all designers probably, right? You see your stuff and you're like, man, I should have tweaked that a little bit, or I should have moved it. Like you're always criticizing yourself. But it's fun, you know, and I get to see like text messages from my grandma. It's like, I saw your dinosaur at the grocery store, you know, and she's like all excited. She's in Texas and her, you know, get to see her grandkid stuff. So I don't know. I think it's a fun way to get your artwork really out in the world. But again, it's very humbling, right? Because then we'll be going for a walk and we'll see like one of our beer cans crushed in the gutter. And I always say to my boyfriend, like, that's where it all goes. All my hard work in the trash. Like, so it's it's that good balance of like, you get your stuff out there and it's neat, but it's humbling because it's also just a can, right? Like it's just a disposable thing that people use for an hour and pitch. But then some people really obsess over the artwork and they love it and they're like dedicated to it. So it's an interesting mix of, you know, respect and people being geeked out, and then also just kind of being like a disposable cup designer, you know, like it's a strange combination.
Yeah. Justin, how about you?
For me, honestly, it's just the gratification of going through the creative process. Like, sounds cheesy, but like I've learned in the past few years, the more I can do that, the happier I am. So, if it's brewing a beer, I compare it to brewing a beer, writing a recipe. Like, it's the same process and the same feelings are evoked when I complete a piece of art or a beer or whatever it is.
Cool. And Ryan, what about you? How do you feel? What do you like most about designing?
Yeah, I mean, y'all kind of nailed everything I was going to say. The community of people that I've met has been amazing, wonderful. Being able to be creative and getting paid for it, gotta love that. And also just kind of having little runners. Like, I have friends of mine on the other side of the country that like show me some, and it's just being able to get your work into other people's hands like that, and make it more accessible is something that I dig. So, yeah.
Cool.
It's the best.
Yeah.
It really is.
I'm going to go combine these last few things. So where do you guys get your inspiration from? Whose labels do you love the most? And your favorite artists? So just general inspiration vibes, whether it's in beer or art or music or whatever. Ryan, go first.
Okay, so sorry, what were those again? What was the order?
Oh, just general inspiration. So whether you get it from music or other beer labels or artists or living or dead or whatever.
Okay. Yep. So general inspiration mostly comes from music for me. That's what I listen to in this studio. I mean, it's just constantly kind of exploring. A lot of inspiration comes from that. Also from just like living, getting outside and not being on my phone and just like checking out like natural textures or color palettes and be like, oh, that works. Like, that's kind of the biggest inspiration on my front, is to just kind of like, because obviously looking at work is so easy and accessible on the phone now, that just kind of breaking away from that, I find that I get way more inspiration just kind of like being outdoors, running around with the kids or taking trips. As far as labels that I dig, I really like Hoof Hearted's labels, just because there's like a freedom to them that, like, I don't know, and they're just really cool and funny, and I really dig those. And also locally, Good Fire, they do a really good job with kind of like minimalist design, and that's like the opposite. Like, I'm like, and they just do such a good job, like kind of keeping it minimal, that I really appreciate those. And then artists in general, Steve Powers is like one of my favorite artists ever. Tristan Eaton is doing wonderful murals all over the country right now. And locally, B. Daniel is a local muralist and artist here that does great work. And my wife Rachel's all right too. She's pretty good at what she does.
Dean, how about you? Where do you get your inspiration from?
Yeah, definitely music. Music is huge for me. Other than art, my other passion is playing guitar. I do play drums and bass too, but guitar is like my main thing. I play it every day. I also am a huge collector. I mentioned before of like anything old paper, photographs, vintage movie posters, music posters, advertisements. I'm obsessed with old typography. I'm also just obsessed with the way anything vintage looks, whether it's an old distressed photograph, an old hand-painted sign, that sort of stuff. I really try to filter into my work. Also, I do a lot of murals too, so there are a lot of mural artists that inspire me. I heard Tristan Eaton's name. That dude is the coolest. I was fortunate enough to paint on the same building as Shepherd Ferry one time, which was super rad, out in Colorado. So those guys, they paint these giant murals, and it's like they look better than my work on paper or on my iPad. It's like it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But yeah, I also I love photography, both collecting it and just and also participating as an amateur photographer. I have a folder on my phone and my computer that's just called inspiration, whether it's a photo I took or a photo I saw online. So I really just try to surround myself too in my studio with cool oddities and colors and other artists' work. just hoping that its vibes will all sort of just like attack me from 360 and just sink into me as I work here at my desk. I think it's really important to surround yourself in your home and your workspace with not only your own work, but other artists' work too. I'd say my favorite artist right now, Daniel Danger. I don't know if you've heard of him. That's his work right there. Dan McCarthy is another amazing screen printer from Cape Cod, Mass. Amy Abshire, she is a really cool, she has these awesome pen and ink drawings. We said Tristan Eaton, Shepherd Ferry too. As far as breweries work that I like, I really dig Hudson Valley Brewing, and Burlington Beer does really cool, like simple, like vector looking style. I love how they let like the can show through, which is really cool, which I'm trying to, again, I was inspired by that. I try to do that in my own labels, rely on letting the natural can show through, which is, I think, sometimes forgotten. Like we get the urge to like cover it all up, but it's like, could actually be a really cool element if it's worked in correctly, there was one more brewery. Bottle Logic Brewing. They have, looked them up. They have this really cool sort of like graphic, like, what's the word? They have like a real like kind of cool poster style to them. And I love how they lay out the labels. It's not just like what I do is like, government warning on the left, barcode and whatever on the right side, and all the arts in the middle. Whereas Bottle Logic, like they use all that space to sort of like parcel out each element, and it has this really cool, complete look instead of just like putting all the quote unquote boring stuff on the side, which is what I'm guilty of, So, I would definitely say Bottle Logic. If you're not familiar with that, check out their work. They're super cool too. So
cool. Justin, how about you? What are you inspired by?
Besides
cats.
Yeah. So, I mean, my stuff probably looks a lot like people say, The Simpsons or Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, all that stuff. Those early cartoons I used to watch, and trace and draw, in middle school.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of looks like. I also get a lot of inspiration from other beer artists. Tim and I do a art print pop-up, which everyone in this panel would be perfect, and you're invited if you want to come whenever we end up doing it. And we focus on beer adjacent artists from all over the country. If anybody wants to come, is willing to come and hang out for the weekend, we sell art in the tasting room here, and everyone usually does pretty well. 2 years ago, Keith Shore came down, which was huge for me. He really inspires me. I have posters. I've always had posters, before I started drawing more heavily of his at my house. I really like, and we've worked with him a bunch. Carl from Omnipolo, his stuff is amazing. He hasn't been to our art show yet, but those guys are inspiring because they're artists, just like all of you. Carl will do art shows in Japan while he's at at the McKeever Beer Fest or like whatever, like, and a lot of it's his labels, just like a different edition of one of his labels in a screen print, and it's really cool how he reinterprets everything, like these like icons that he's created, trying to think. Dan from Forest in Maine is a friend of mine. I did an art show up there in Pennsylvania, and he does watercolor stuff for all of the Forest in Maine labels. He's the owner there. His stuff's really cool. He's fun to follow on Instagram.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Sarah, besides Halloween and monsters, what are you inspired by?
I would say music. I have an obsessive art book buying problem. halfpricebooks.com, and I've been really close friends for the last 6 months. So I'm really into, like Ryan was saying, like getting off the phone and trying to connect with graphics in a different way. I know that a lot of people like to look at a lot of artwork online. I find it really like intimidating. Like if you're just like looking at like curated, gorgeous, like amazing work that like I feel like your brain can get very like, well, you're not as good as them, so you might as well just go eat a cheeseburger and watch Schitt's Creek again. Like, like don't even try. So I try to really not scroll. If I'm like trying to be creative and looking for inspiration, I try to really not go to that place because for me, it doesn't serve me very well. So art books, music. Again, when I go traveling, this is like my biggest thing about COVID that's bummed me out is like not going to art museums has been a big bummer. There was supposed to be a huge Frida Kahlo exhibit in Chicago this summer that I was like so excited about that isn't happening now. So that's a big inspiration for me. And again, it's that standing in front of a piece of artwork is so much different than scrolling past a piece of artwork. I also collect antique photographs, like obsessively. I like the idea of having a reference that nobody else has, right? You're not Googling 2 figures by a beach, right? You're looking at this picture that like nobody else in the world has this picture. Like there's one, it is from like 1932. Like there are duplicates. I like using those as reference and inspiration for a lot of my personal artwork. As far as other breweries, I really like Against the Grain. I think that the illustrations on those are super fun. Every time I see Citra Ass Down, I laugh. Like, and I get so bummed that we didn't come up with that name. It's so funny. And it's funny because I really like the artwork, but I really also, they make the brown note, and it's like one of my least favorite labels of all time because it grosses me out so bad. But also kudos to them because that takes some kahunas to make that label. So I do enjoy their stuff. And then Breckenridge, the redesigns that they've been doing, I think are really nice and really fresh. And they're super detailed. And again, like Ryan, like I am not a minimalist. My artwork is like, and just, I want to fill every space with 1,000 little details. So I really like their packaging for that. As far as artists go outside of beer, Andrea Koch is like a fine art artist, and I'm obsessed with her paintings. They're like really very detailed, ethereal, kind of weird paintings. Check her out. And then Egon Schiele is like one of my all-time favorite artists of all time. Just the way that he draws the human figure, I think is super fascinating. So I mean, I think like everybody, it's all around you if you're paying attention to it. And I think it's good to find a way to connect with it offline, you know, and collect it in whatever manner or form you need to. But getting away from the screen, I think, is crucial.
Yeah, especially now when we're on. I've been on a screen all day, every day, like you, and it's important to step away.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much. This has been so cool and so awesome learning about your process and your practice and seeing inside your space and inside your brain.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
The other beer, the other beer, the other beer show.